Well, welcome back for the fourth lecture on the influence Christianity had on the founding of the United States. And so today we will finish up this series of lectures. Let me share the screen with you and we'll just start right off. Well, last time we talked about some of the influences on the founding fathers of the U.S. And of course, the largest one was Christianity. And that would be the biggest influence of all of them. But you also had the Enlightenment thinking that was present and some deistic views of God. And we don't want to forget those, their involvement. But for the most part, the founding fathers were looking to Christianity as part of the foundation of what would make the United States a great country and would be an integral part of what would keep the country going in the right direction and be part of its foundation. Because without that aspect of it, they didn't feel like it would succeed. And we'll see this more as we go through some of these things. And so we're going to look at some of the things the founding fathers said about the Christian religion. So we'll see some excerpts, some documents, and so forth. An excerpt from the Declaration of Independence states, "All men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." So, you know, that right from the beginning, the Declaration of Independence notes there's a Creator, and that we have rights that can't be violated by our government. And these are rights given by the Creator, God. After signing the Declaration of Independence, Samuel Adams, who was called the firebrand of the American Revolution, he could have really fiery rhetoric. He affirmed the obedience to God by stating, "We have this day restored the sovereign to whom alone men ought to be obedient," sovereign being God. Reverend Dr. John Witherspoon, signer of the Declaration of Independence, described as the man who shaped America, said, "God grant that in America true religion and civil liberty may be inseparable." So notice civil liberty and religion inseparable. All right, so Benjamin Franklin, who falls on the deistic side, also signed the Declaration of Independence, delivered his most famous speech in June 28th, 1787, at the age of 81. He stated, "The longer I live, the more proof I see that God governs in the affairs of man. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain." So notice very biblical references here by Benjamin Franklin, not known for being an Orthodox Christian, but more of a deist. But God governs in the affairs of people. And, you know, he looks at the empire talking about the development of the United States, how can it succeed without his aid? And if God's not involved, how can it stand? Very religious thinking and quoting Christian biblical references here. Other Christian signers of the Declaration are Charles Thomson, who is responsible for the first translation of the Greek Septuagint into English. So you notice these guys are highly involved in Christian thinking. Dr. Benjamin Rush, he was founder of the first Bible Society in America. Francis Hopkinson, he published the first American hymn book. Cesar Rodney, whose home state of Delaware, the first state to ratify the U.S. Constitution, required that office holders sign a declaration of Christian faith. So notice how much Christianity is involved in all with all these guys who were signers of the Declaration of Independence. John Hancock, president of the Continental Congress, said, let us humbly commit our righteous cause to the great Lord of the universe. Or Governor Morris, the person who wrote the preamble to the Constitution in 1787, said, religion is the solid basis of good morals. Therefore, education should teach the precepts of religion and the duties of man toward God. William Patterson, signer of the Constitution, closed his speeches with Proverbs 29:2. When the righteous rule, people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people groan. So again, Christianity is very much a part of everything they're doing at the establishment of the new government of the United States. George Mason was called the father of the Bill of Rights, stated, my soul I resign into the hands of my almighty creator. So of the 55 delegates to the Constitutional Convention, 52 strongly professed the Christian faith and signed at the end of the Constitution, done in the year of our Lord, 1787. John Jay, who was the first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, wrote, unto him who is the author and giver of all good, I render sincere and humble thanks for our redemption and salvation by his beloved Son. To this day, every court session at Supreme Court begins with this shout, God save the United States and his honorable court. So you can see, here's John Jay, first Supreme Court Justice, very much talking like a traditional Christian would about salvation through God's beloved Son. So there's been studies done on, how Christianity has influenced our founding fathers. University of Houston did some research looking at all these founding documents that were written, and 34% of all quotes in the founding documents were from the Bible, according to their research. And so Christian principles were highly influential in developing the U.S. government and the governmental system, with its moral teachings regarded as necessary for maintaining our system of governance. So we were removed from that time period, but they were struggling with, okay, we make this governmental system which allows a lot of freedom by people, but we know people can be bad and do things that are wrong. So what is it in our system that's going to help, keep people acting more moral and to make a system like this with this much freedom work? And their idea was, you got to have the Christian principles involved. And you see down there, it says, was America founded to be secular? That is a link to a video. I will put that video with this one here for you to watch, but it goes over some of what we're talking about here, and just it'll help you to see clearly what we're talking about. So be sure to watch it. We'll have some videos throughout this this presentation that you need to watch to get the full extent of what's the influence of Christianity at the founding of the nation. Here in the Declaration of Independence, we can note some things that they're outlined in red here. Here you have, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve their political bonds which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature, and notice nature's God, entitled them. So the entitlement they're looking to God is saying, they can assume these powers, and they have right to an equal station. And then further down, it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So you can remember that earlier by the philosopher Kant, life, liberty, and property. And property figures greatly also in the Constitution, as people have the right to own personal property. And so it comes up, but here they summarize it with the pursuit of happiness. But notice again, this is, something that God has given, and they recognize this is, to have these rights is God given. And so again, Christianity is very prevalent. Thomas Jefferson, who's generally considered one of the least religious fellows, but for a fellow that was not really very religious, he said a lot of religious things. And can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis? Now notice he's saying, can our liberties of a nation be secure if we take away this basis he's talking about? And that is a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are a gift of God. So notice he's going back to God, that they are not to be violated, but with his wrath. So Jefferson, like all the others, knew that they had to have this moral foundation that Christianity provides by its teaching. And so this was taking his notes on the state of Virginia. Well, here's George Washington in his farewell address. He has a lot to say about this because he was feeling already then there were pressures against, having this Christian foundation. He says religion and morality are indispensable supports. So for the government to exist, they're indispensable supports. In vain would man claim the tribute of patriotism, who should labor to subvert this great pillar of human happiness. So he's afraid of subversion of this religion and morality as a foundation, which of course we can see today that that's still something that gets subverted. These firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician equally with pious man ought to respect and to cherish them. A volume could not trace all the connections with private and public felicity. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation deserts the oaths, which are the instruments of investigation in the courts of justice? And let us with caution indulge in this supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. So he comes out right, just say it. You can't have morality without religion. And he's specifically talking about the Christian religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on the minds of particular structure, reason, and experience, both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in the exclusion of religious principles. So he says, doesn't matter about the education or reason. And of course, he may be referring here to Enlightenment thinking as the sole foundation. He's saying you can't have that as the sole foundation. National morality can't prevail at the exclusion of religious principles. So George Washington was pretty, solid in his thinking of the need for Christianity to undergird that, because it provides the moral foundation for so much freedom that we do enjoy. So he goes on in his farewell address talking about religion and morality enjoin this conduct. And can it be that good policy does not equally enjoin it? It will be worthy of a free, enlightened, and at no distant period, a great nation to give to mankind the magnanimous and too novel example of a people always guided by exalted justice and benevolence. Who can doubt that in the course of time and things, the fruits of such a plan would richly repay any temporary advantages? which might be lost by steady adherence to it? Can it be that Providence, God in other words, has not connected the permanent felicity of a nation with its virtue? The experiment, at least, is recommended by every sentiment which ennobles human nature. Alas, it renders it impossible by its vices. So again, this experiment of making this new nation, he's saying it has to have religion and the morality that comes with it. Otherwise, it won't prosper, is his point. All right, well, the founding fathers and the religious roots here. What did the founding fathers intend by the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights? And so we're moving further into the founding of the nation. You got the 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights in 1791, and these were additional to the Constitution. And so we have to ask the question, did the founding fathers mean that no religious practice could be part of state or federal sponsored entities? And so now, we can see that they did believe that you had to have the Christian religion as part of the foundation for the founding of the nation, for it to continue to prosper as a nation, to enjoy the freedoms that come with it, because there's an adherence to the moral teachings in Christianity. But now we get into a specific statement in the Bill of Rights in the First Amendment, and what did it actually mean? So if we move to that, Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof of religion, and or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, there's a lot in this First Amendment. It's freedom of religion, freedom of speech, press, and the right for peaceful assembly, and petitioning the government. We're going to focus in on, of course, the first one. And notice the very first thing in these amendments is that Congress, so this is limiting Congress' ability, they can make no law respecting an establishment of a religion. In other words, Congress, by our Constitution, these amendments, cannot establish a state religion. Now, remember, the historical background that these people were coming from. They came from places where there were state religions, and it was enforced that you have to follow the teachings of the state religion, and you would be persecuted if you didn't. And so one of the first things this new government system puts in place is, no, the government can't establish a state religion. But not only that, it can't prohibit the free exercise of religion, whatever that religion is. They don't specify. Now, of course, the primary religion at the time was Christianity, but it would apply to any religion. But so Congress can't make laws prohibiting the exercise of that religion. And this is just like the freedom of speech. Congress can't pass laws to infringe on people's freedom to say what they want. And this goes with the press. So we have to realize that the same thing that's said of speech and press is being said of the exercise of our religion. And so this is usually the first one established. It's called the Establishment Clause. Cannot establish a state religion. The Free Exercise Clause is the one that has been reinterpreted in ways that were not intended by the founders. But it basically says Congress must allow the free exercise of religion. And it did not limit that to say you can only do that in your home or your private sphere or church building. Can't do it out in public, or you can't do it in places that the government owns, and so forth and so on. That's not there, although court cases have pushed it that direction. And we'll be looking at that in our next lecture series. We'll hit some of that as well as we talk about the secularization, and that is part of it. But it doesn't limit that. And so we have to keep that in mind. Well, it does not say, as we often commonly hear, separation of church and state. This is the most common thing if you listen to the news and there's something about religion and things like that. Like here in our state, where there was a religious monument going to be put up in a location on government property, and there was a big ruckus, and they talked about separation of church and state. Well, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights does not mention the separation of church and state. The phrase originated with Thomas Jefferson from a letter he wrote to a Baptist group, and that phrase got taken into a Supreme Court ruling, and that's what popularized it. But so in that, Jefferson was really saying that no state religion was to be organized by the government. And besides that, government at that time period allowed religion in the public sphere. And we'll see more of that. And if you watch this video that I've got the link to there, it's a very good video. It's there's an organization that does tours of the Capitol, but what they're doing is they're showing the Christian foundation through the historical events and what's in the Capitol building to show how much Christianity did influence the founding of the nation. So, and these founding fathers, and you learn a lot about it. And so watch the video clip about that, and it give you some very interesting information. For example, that the Capitol, they had worship services of several different Christian groups in the Capitol building. Now, you don't see that today, but there's this idea of separation of church and state was not understood or interpreted the way it gets later interpreted down the road around 1950s. And but at the same time, it didn't allow the government to establish a religion. But it didn't mean people couldn't freely practice it, whether it was on state or federal property or on private property. So basically, people were free to practice religion in public places as well as privately. And so this is a good video to watch on that. They're kind of going to want you to say, hey, would you sign up for our tour? But what they do with it is you get a taste of what they do, and it gives you some good information. So Thomas Jefferson actually, as president, wrote a letter to the Danbury Baptist Association in Connecticut. This is after he was elected. And it contains the first known reference to this wall of separation, which the separation of church and state. And in it states, I contemplate with solemn reverence that act of the whole American people, which declares that the legislature should make no laws respecting the establishment of religion. Well, he's quoting, of course, the First Amendment, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So he's just quoting the First Amendment. And then this is where the phrase comes in, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. In other words, again, the state cannot dictate, saying this is the state religion and cannot dictate, that you to infringe on your free exercise thereof. And this link here for this other video, here is a very good presentation of a scholar, historian, talking about this phrase right here. And he can give you a very good understanding of what Jefferson actually meant by that. But it was not intended, as the Supreme Court ruling later will say, that it should limit whether you can have religion involved in public sphere. And so watch that video. I will put it in with this video so that it'll be right there for you. None of these videos are very long, but they will be helpful in helping you understand what we're talking about here. So Jefferson's wall of separation as a matter of federalism was explaining that the First Amendment provided protection for the freedom of practice religion without interference from the government. So he's just saying that wall of separation keeps the government from infringing on your religious freedoms. And this was in response to the Baptist concern in 1802. And because they were kind of a group that felt like their liberties were being infringed on. And Jefferson said that the practice of religion is an inalienable right, so the government can't infringe on those rights, whatever they are. So the wall of separation between church and state was to keep government from infringing on religious activities. So that was the meaning of that. And the videos you'll watch, they'll go into a good bit more detail on that, which will help you understand that. So today, when you hear separation of church and state, it's not what Jefferson intended by it, and how it was used by a particular Supreme Court ruling and then has been carried down since then was using it out of its original context for its meaning. And so we need to keep that in mind. All right, so the wall's primary function was to delineate constitutional jurisdiction of the national and state government, respectively, on religious concerns. So when Jefferson became president, his predecessors had at times said, well, we'll have these special days of prayer or this. And Jefferson declined to do that as president, not because there was anything wrong. He just felt strongly the government shouldn't be involved, setting those things up. And, but everybody else was free to do it. And so he was just trying to leave it up to the religion, to Christianity, to set their own, and the government couldn't interfere with that, whether it was in public areas or private. And state governments could do it if they wanted to. So anyway, keep that in mind when you hear that statement. So we're going to cut it off there. That's the end of this series, and we'll pick up a little more on this when we get into tracing historically how some of the secularization in the U.S. has been pushing religion further out of involvement. But this was to set the tone of the fact that when the United States was founded, it was considered by its founding fathers to need that Christian religion dimension to really be successful. And that's the part that we have to keep in mind. The founding fathers never intended to have a secular system. They knew that it had to have some kind of moral foundation, and they felt like the only really legitimate one is the Christian moral foundation. And so we want to keep that in mind. as we go forward, but that'll be the next series of lectures. And so that finishes up this, but remember, look at those other videos. They will elaborate more on what we're talking about here and help you get a handle on that. And of course, it will help you on doing your work assignments and taking the exams. So take care. I will see you at the beginning of the next lectures.